All
Yeah.
right. Welcome, everyone. This is Pillars of Postpartum Support, and I am Barb Davis with Birth Fort Worth. Today, we're going to be talking about how to set yourself up for a well-supported, well-rested, hopefully, postpartum transition. So today, today we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to do some introductions, obviously. We're going to talk on some mental health statistics. We're going to explore postpartum worldwide, just a snapshot because there's a lot, but it's going to be an interesting comparison, no doubt. We're going to talk about those pillars of postpartum support. We're going to talk about writing a birth plan, and then we're going to share some of our favorite resources with you as well. Oh, excuse me, we jumped ahead of ourselves there a lot. Look at that. Okay, so a little bit introduction. My name's Barb Davis. I am the founder and practice manager here at Birth Fort Worth. I am a dual certified birth and postpartum doula, childbirth educator, breastfeeding educator, a mom of two myself. And, we're going to talk a lot about our own postpartum experiences. And so I'm very frank when we talk about it. I had postpartum depression with both of my children. And it wasn't until I had my second child that I realized what I had been experiencing with my first. So, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And it's something that we place a lot of emphasis on at Birth Fort Worth. From our own prenatal and postnatal screenings to free plans for support to an extensive resource list so that we can get you in and get you, or not we, but we can help you get connected with your resources, because we know what a important time this transition is, right? And the difference that support makes. So all of that to say, we're very excited to be here, and I'm going to actually kick it off to Amanda, who is a Birth Fort Worth doula, and she also owns her own practice, Illuminate Birth. She's going to do a little bit of intro and then kick us off today.
I'm so excited too. Yeah, like she said, I have my own private practice, Eliminate Birth Services. I have been in this world now. I dipped my toe in about 9 years ago, and then I've been working steadily for the last 6.5 years. Learned a lot through, like you said, you walk through your own postpartum journey, and then you start supporting a larger group of people through their own journeys, and you learn some things, you see some things, and you see things that work really well. You see things that need a little help, need a little love, a little extra care. But like she said, I'm a birth and postpartum doula. I specialize in postpartum rituals. I'm also a Reiki practitioner. So I do kind of a smattering of things. As a birth worker, we tend to fill the need where the need is, and so we kind of just follow a bit of a rabbit trail, but then that rabbit trail turns into a deep passion and focus. So yeah, I'm excited to share with you today. So going into this, I just wanted to talk a little bit first about the statistics around mental health during postpartum. We hear all the time, we have the term baby blues. It's very common to experience these baby blues. It doesn't mean that they are not difficult to deal with in some time. It impacts up to 80% of birthing individuals. That's a lot. That's the grand majority. I talk to people every now and then that didn't experience that, and I feel that they are, kind of those lucky few. There's so many hormones at play within that, right? So, we have had those hormones rise all the way through pregnancy. And then we have our baby, we deliver that placenta that was helping to balance some of those hormones. And then we have this major drop in the big hormones and our estrogen, in everything. And so that's a big reason for why we might feel kind of that pendulum swing. You might feel overwhelmed or tearful or exhausted, kind of that hypomanic or irritable. You can be laughing at something in one moment and then you're crying in the next, and you're just kind of hovering over yourself, in a surreal moment of like, why am I crying? I don't know why I'm crying. That can be that can be very normal, frustrating as it may be, but still normal. That defined window, it can come on around days 2 or 3, kind of when that birth high, essentially that oxytocin dump that we got, At delivery, yeah, all that kind of comes down. And then we settle into the swings of things. And that can last around 2 weeks. So with baby blues, that resolves naturally, with rest, with support, with good nutrition. Baby blues can kind of resolve itself. So then that's kind of where it starts looking a little bit more like perhaps PMAD or perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. This can happen anytime. It's not limited to that time following birth. It can happen before, during, throughout, that whole post-birth year. And it doesn't just naturally resolve itself. Professional support is crucial. Exercise and sleep won't just fix it. And, we hear it all the time. Well, just exercise a little. Oh, you just need a little extra sleep. Oh, no, there are bigger things at play. We have a whole fantastic cocktail of hormones and chemicals in our brain and in our body. And so we really have to support those wisely. And it's not just depression, that can look like psychosis, depression, bipolar, anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and postpartum rage. It's a very broad category. It's a very big spectrum. So in one study of 10,000 women, 21% of those women, so 1 in 5 essentially, qualified as having postpartum depression. That's quite a bit, considering, we have 80% that dealt with baby blues, and now we have 1 in 5 that's dealing with PMAD. And so of that 21%, they took a look at when those onset symptoms were popping up. So about 26%, it was prior to pregnancy. So, maybe they had a history of depression, anxiety, bipolar, things like that. 30% or 33% was during pregnancy. So we're already starting to see more of that layer, because even during pregnancy, our hormones are doing wild things, right? We've all been there. We just want French fries and we're going to cry about it, and that's okay. The hormones are already doing crazy things. However, we are already starting to see with so many, if we're paying attention, to seeing some of those symptoms kind of creeping in. And then 40% of those is during the postpartum period. So that really translates to 60% of those developed, who had developed PMAD, developed those either during or before pregnancy. And so, it's a high prevalence. It really is a high prevalence. And so much of that goes unreported, because so much of the time we just become very isolated in our postpartum season. We feel very alone, and we don't always feel heard. We go to that 2 or 6 week checkup with our OB, and, they're like, well, how you feeling? You're like, I'm tired. And, you might be using some language that brings up PMADs, and they're like, oh, you'll be fine once you have a night's sleep. And, we need more. And so finding language around that and resources to help that is really crucial. So before we kind of talk about these pillars of support that we can really strengthen to help with that, I wanted to take a little bit of time to look about what that looks like around the world. I think we have a pretty strong idea that here in the United States, we don't do a great job of supporting our people in their postpartum journey, especially when we take a look at around the world and how they treat that. In Canada, they get a full year off, paid, which is just amazing. They get to just be parents and just be themselves and have a reset. In Latin America, they have a season called La Cuarentena, which really strongly, translates into quarantine. So that's the first 40 days of postpartum. In this time, it's just rest and recovery for the new mom. Here we're lucky if we take 2 weeks. We're getting a little better. I'm hearing a lot more people have, 8 weeks or possibly 12 weeks. But even still, in Japan, they have a practice. Please give me grace here. Sadagiri Bumben is their practice of staying home. That's, they are basically home from 32 to 35 weeks of pregnancy until a few months postpartum. I have so many clients and, that they work right up to the day. So to be able to take that time is so wonderful. In Germany, they have Wochenbett, which translates to week in bed, or weeks in bed. So that first 6 to 8 weeks after birth for resting, healing, and nourishment. They have in-home midwife visits. So that care is coming to you instead of you having to bundle up your baby and attempt to, carry a car seat and your diaper bag, and you're still bleeding from your postpartum discharge and all of these things. But then they come to you, which I think is so invaluable. So, Barb, are there a few more that we could look at here?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to, that's actually a perfect transition over to our next slide, because I was working with a client recently and she's Korean, and we were kind of going through our postpartum. Like when we talk about postpartum planning, I talk about, okay, what does your postpartum support look like? What is your partner's leave? Are you partnered first? What does their leave look like? What does your leave look like? And then we start to kind of dive into what are our resources. And she was like, oh, no, I feel really good about it. And she's like, I don't know if you know, but I'm Korean. And she said, my mom's coming, and then my husband's family's coming. And she said, for the first 2 to 4 weeks, that is the most crucial time in our recovery. We're not meant to do anything. I'm not cleaning. I'm not cooking. I'm not even taking care of the baby. Like she's feeding the baby, but she's not expected to do anything else. She said, in fact, they're going to spoon feed me in bed this whole time. She's like, oh no, I won't be doing anything. And that is not an exception. That is the norm.
Yeah.
There are so many folks, when we talk about China, Korea, and Israel, even, they have this idea of a confinement nanny, and it can be your female relatives or your loved ones. They may come to stay in your house. But again, we're seeing that theme of 30 to 40 days. The meals are prepared for you with an emphasis on healing through the stages of recovery and warming even, right? We also have our ones in India here, again, where we see it's approximately 40 days. The birthing person there is either moving in with their mother or their mother's moving in with them. That is super, super common in my families that I work with from India. Oh, my mom is flying in, she'll be here for 3 months. Like, it's just, of course, right? Like, it's a given. Again, we're focusing on warming ingredients. In this particular culture, we're covering head to help prevent heat loss. So we're seeing here a recurrent theme about rest, about healing, warming ingredients, and, protecting against heat loss. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, but I just like to point out, it's a lot different than what we see here in the United States even. But
absolutely,
even within the United States, it varies from state to state. I work with a lot of families in California, New York, New Jersey. There's a few other states that are included in that list, but they get things like disability leave to spend time with their babies and paid family leave, and it's built into the state benefits. So when we think about the United States, we're thinking about like we're lumping everyone together, but I encourage you to really get a little curious about what some of the different state leaves look like, because even the state that you live in here in the US can really dictate the amount of time that you're going to be able to have for recovery. So does your employer. There are employers out there who offer this as part of their benefits package. So these are the things that we definitely, whenever possible, and I understand it's a huge privilege to be able to accept or decline a job based on just this particular thing, but that is something that we want to start thinking about, right? We need to hold our employees accountable, or employers, excuse me, around the type of benefits that they're offering. And we get to speak with our pocketbook so often in this world that we live in, and that can be a great way to think about this. Amanda, anything that you would add before we go on to the next one?
Oh man, I think that really covers, the majority of it. I think we all have our own experiences. I was kind of similar to you, Barb. First go around, we were just so much in survival mode that I didn't even know what I was really experiencing. I was so disconnected and separated from my body for months at a time. We had a child who was medically fragile. So, there was a lot of protective mode happening for myself. And so, we did what we had to do. And so I think that made it even more exciting to bring this information that we're about to dive into.
I
And
totally
so, yeah, yeah, yeah.
agree. Um, gosh, you said something there that spoke to me. I lost it, of course. So we'll come, it pops into my brain, but that's a good transition into our actually talking about our pillars of support, right?
Yeah,
So when we
yeah.
look at our first pillar here, we're looking at extended bed rest. And when Amanda put this together and I saw that that was on there, I was like, yes, because this is something that we have been teaching in our, your best birth classes since the, inception back in 2015. So when we think about extended bed rest, it's more than just a few days, right? It is not, when we're looking at extended bed rest, least, and I like to tell folks, a week in the bed when you get home with your new baby. Then we've got a week around the bed, right? Then we can have a week around the house, right? And that can be a great way to kind of think about it. It's still not the 30 or 40 days. If we do our math, it's only 21. And honestly, most folks are up and about a lot sooner. However, this is one of those pillars that's so, so important. And if we think about it, it has a lot to do with internal healing as well. Let's take a look at the size of an average placenta. This is it. This is average placenta. This is the size of my hand. Now I'm tall, I can palm a basketball. So, I mean, it's about a sixth of the size of your baby. So if this
Yeah.
wound was anywhere else on your body, there would not be the same type of expectations that we tend to put on new parents, new mothers in particular, around hosting and bouncing back and having something to prove. And I think that that can be a very invasive mindset. I know I was that way with my first. I was going to be different. I was going to be able to show and like my worth was tied to how quickly and how quickly I was able to recover and pretend like I didn't just have a baby, because I thought that that was how I, excelled at this parenthood thing. It's not, newsflash. It's not. So when we're thinking about internal healing, just this wound even, right? So surface area, yes, it's, it kind of shrinks back down and surface area goes down some, but it's still there. That's why we have such, we have heavy bleeding at first, then we have tapers off. But even still, we're having some clear discharge several weeks postpartum. That doesn't mean that we're in the clear. It's just stages of healing, right?
Absolutely.
There's a reason they tell you not to lift anything heavier than your baby when you leave that hospital. And that's your baby in a car seat. And just like you mentioned, Amanda, we're toting that baby in a car seat with a diaper bag at 3 or 2 weeks, 6 weeks postpartum. We need to be resting.
Sometimes even 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
You get out of the hospital and they want to see your baby at, within 48 hours at the pediatrician's office. And then, if you have jaundice, the whole gamut of things. And so now all of a sudden you're like,
not great on the pelvic floor, right? We know that the pelvic floor is a sling of muscles, right? It's a sling. And as your baby grew and got bigger, it put more and more pressure on that pelvic floor. So even if your baby was born surgically, right, that still doesn't diminish the impact of the stress on your pelvic floor and the time that it's going to take to get back to a new normal, right? There's still all of that relaxin, which is a hormone that kind of loosens our joints and softens our ligaments and tendons a little bit. So, a lot of newly postpartum folks describe a feeling of very unstable or instability, kind of loose, empty, just not like just kind of unsecure feeling, right? And that's what that comes from. It's that relaxin that's still there, and all of these organs re-shifting back into their new location. I mean, it's like they got to get back to where they belong. If our stomachs,
they have a journey to go on.
They have a journey, right? Absolutely. So now the other thing that I love to talk about is the fact that, for those of us that are planning to breast or body feed our babies, that week in bed, week around the house, that is incredible, or week around the bed and then week around the house, that's incredibly protective of that breastfeeding relationship as well, right? Because if we're spending that whole week doing nothing but eating and sleeping and feeding our baby and getting to know them, then we are guaranteeing ourselves, a way to get this off to a good start, because data tells us that we need frequent feeds in that first week. An average of at least every 2 hours around the clock for that whole first week is a great way to set up our lactation journey. And what a better way to do that, right? Than kind of being in our bed, around our bed. it's multifaceted here, that it's helping us, it's helping our baby, and it's kind of ensuring that we're getting that time that we need. Now, this is baby steps, right? But this is a great way to think about this first pillar. Anything that you'd add here, Amanda, before I hand it back over to you?
Yeah, I mean, you even think about it, in reality, and you'll notice, part of our 5 pillars, sleep is not on there. Sleep is so transient, and we get it where we can. But I think one thing about that extended bed rest, you are more likely to actually get a little bit more sleep if you're already in the location that you can sleep. And so if you have those people around that you're able to say, here's my baby, I love you, I'm going to take a snooze, and you're already in bed, guess what? You just roll over and go to sleep. Versus, if you were out in the living room and you were hosting and you were chatting and all the things, and now you have to be like, is it cool if I go? And, no, just roll over and go to sleep. And so that's a huge way to kind of work in those little extra bits of rest, and whether that looks like a guided meditation. If you're not able to fully turn off your brain, I hear this from a lot of people. Well, I'm just not able to sleep during the day, or, it gets so boring. There are so many ways to entertain yourself. Have a coloring book, playing on your iPad, save a show to binge watch. Some guided relaxation, listening to music, doing some breath work while you're in bed. There's so many ways to continue that healing, even if you're not able to completely shut off your brain.
Yes.
Perhaps even investing in some blackout curtains for that period of time. You may absolutely love natural light, and I do too. But you also need rest. You're not on this, getting to sleep 8 hours at night. We talk about this with our clients so much. It's a cumulative amount of sleep. So you might be getting 1 hour here, 2 hours here, an hour and a half there. And so those daytime naps for our postpartum people is so crucial. And I actually have a story regarding all of this. So second go around with my second baby, I actually felt really good, which was a very big change from my first baby. And my first career, I was a dance teacher, choreographer, all of this. And, I missed my classes, everything like that. So I was 2 weeks postpartum, 2 weeks, not even out of the time where I should have just been around my bed, right? And I was like, I'll just go. I'll teach a class. I won't do much. And I remember it happened so fast. I just slid one leg out to do a very, very small demonstration, and I pulled a groin muscle. And then I dealt with that pulled groin muscle for the next 6 months. And so that, now I'm dealing with that on top of everything else. But, I look back on that and I was like, how could I have done that? But I felt so good. You really have to watch out and protect your body and realize there's so many things at play to get your body healed. So, yeah, we also tell a lot of our clients, you are resting and you are recouping as if it is your job. So many people are like, I got to keep up with dishes, or I got to do laundry, or no. Your job is to heal. Healing is your job during this season. So I think extended bed rest really goes a long way for that.
Absolutely. No doubt. Yes. We'll talk more about some of the other things a little bit later too, but absolutely. It's pillar 1 for a reason, right? So let's move on and talk about warming therapies. Amanda, what have you got for us?
Oh, I'm so excited. Warming therapies have really become a deep part of my heart. Even here, as I said, I have a warm blanket on my lap. I have cozy socks on my feet. I'm wearing a sweater. I have my warm beverage. Exactly. There's so much of warming therapy that we just kind of naturally do in our lives. Showers are one of those. It's great. In Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, warmth is healing. Like, it's literally that direct correlation. You see a lot, obviously, when we were talking about around the world, you see so many cultures of warmth, during that postpartum period, not allowing cool air or cold winds to access the body. And so that's, kind of a thing to think about. So much of us in our American culture, we're like, I want all the ice in my water. And cold water is nice. I get it. But, maybe intermix some hot tea in there. But warming therapies are simply the act of applying heat to the body, whether it be a warm blanket, whether it be doing some yoni steaming, which that's a whole fun scenario that I have really been excited to bring to the community. But it can look like so many things. A heating pad, maybe an electric blanket, sitz bath, binding, warming oil, a warm robe, warm food. It doesn't have to look like these big elaborate scenarios. But why do we need them? So it improves your blood circulation for faster healing, fighting inflammation and swelling, loosening those muscles to prevent soreness, particularly, right after you gave birth. You worked really hard. It's running like 5 marathons all packed together. So your body needs some love in that moment, benefiting your sleep quality and your mood. But then also rituals have power. I mean, how many of us, whether it's tea or coffee, you wake up in the morning and it is your ritual to make yourself a cup of tea or make yourself a cup of coffee, to take your warm shower. We have these rituals in our lives. They are markers of time. And they do such a beautiful job of not only being those markers of time, but also bringing healing to our bodies. So, it's the presence of support. That's the key protective element, or a key protective element within protecting against PMAD. It's the whole thing of what makes you happy. And I can tell you, especially during the winter, nothing makes me happier than curling up with an electric blanket. Like I just pull it on up and my whole body immediately just kind of melts. And I sink into that parasympathetic nerve system. And my body can do a little healing and resting in that moment.
I also like to point out here, we hear a lot about, you mentioned yoni steaming and how blood brings healing and blood flow. I'm so sorry, warmth brings, blood flow, and that increases our healing, right? That's one of those things that I'm a stickler for when people talk about like padsicles, right? And talking about, some healing for postpartum, which padsicles, if you aren't familiar with what they are, it's taking a pad, right, for postpartum, bleeding, and then adding some herbs or witch hazel, things like that to kind of aid in the healing. And then they end up doing that for a long time. And so this is one of those call outs that I like to make. And I think it's a great place to do it here around that is we only want to use that for the very, very first few days at the most, 24, 48 hours max. And then we want to shift over to these healing or to these warming therapies. At least just the act of standing for a little bit helps that blood flow and encourages that healing. So that's when we think about healing and warming therapies, that's one that always pops to my mind. Ice may help with inflammation for a very short time, right? But then we also have to be mindful of the nature of the delicate tissues and the benefits of the blood flow to the area, right? So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. In that regard. And that actually takes us, we can talk a little bit more about body work if you'd like here, Amanda.
Absolutely. So, gosh, body work involves so much. I mean, you think about all the things that your body just did, right? And so body work can look like a lot of things. It can look like massage, acupuncture, chiropractor, craniosacral therapy, binding, closing ceremonies, Reiki. But it can also look like breath work and doing some gentle stretches, even if it's just a gentle stretching back and forth, rolling those shoulders, taking in that breath, doing some guided relaxation. And guess what? Those are things that you can do in your bed. We'll slide that in. It all is connected. Going and, doing an evaluation for pelvic floor PT, that typically looks a little further down the road, around 6 weeks or so. But that can really help assess to what's going on with your pelvic floor. With body work though, we're helping that blood flow. We're bringing warmth to the body along with that. Um, with touch, with just touch, we're having oxytocin release and stress reduction, anxiety reduction. There's so many studies around what just touch looks like and what that does for our brain and our body. And so that also can be hugs and intentional touch. So our postpartum season, we can so easily get touched out. It's very touch intensive with our babies, right? Lots of skin to skin, body feeding if we're doing body feeding. There's so many moments where we're just overwhelmed. But that can be a great time to have those conversations even prior to pregnancy or even prior to postpartum with your partner and your immediate surrounding community regarding your needs. So what does that need look like for you? Does massage fill your bucket? Does a hug fill your bucket? We're looking for ways to fill that deficit, to fill that gap. At the same time, on the other side of things, it can be, does that drain you? You might have a partner if you're partnered, or your community, your mother-in-law or whoever that might be, who's very touch friendly, but you are not as much. And so having those conversations up front and saying, hey, I may not want a hug. And I appreciate that you do. So maybe let's talk around what that looks like so I can also provide that for you, but yet we're keeping that to a minimum. And that can change. One day you need 15 hugs, and the next day you don't want me touched at all. And have, that upfront communication goes such a long way to continuing that communication. I think that having upfront conversations around these things, it provides an open line to be able to say, hey, you know what, today, this is actually what I need, versus, having these moments build and build and build. And now all of a sudden things kind of explode. And so again, that's why we strengthen each of these pillars, to where when one of those pillars feels a little weak, the other ones take the space of that. And so, you might have a day that you did have to go out for a pediatrician appointment, and then maybe you had this happen, and you had time when you were supposed to really be in bed, but maybe you were out for hours and now you're exhausted. But you know what? Maybe a good meal and maybe a good hug of just like, I've got you, you're okay, everything is okay. Yeah, and then curling up with that warm blanket, and all of those things can really support when maybe we didn't get the bed rest that we needed in that day. And so I think that body work is a really important space around that. So, one of the things with that is, looking ahead of time of like, okay, I know I want to do a massage. I know that, maybe you've been seeing a chiropractor all this time. I want to go and get adjusted. Maybe I want to do a closing ceremony and help some of that energy to come back into my body, and some body work that helps us to really think back some of those embodiment practices, because we can feel very separated from our body from birth, during that postpartum season, all of those things. So anything to add, Barb?
No, I think that's you very succinct overview. However, one thing that I always recommend folks to do is, if they know that they're going to want some of these modalities, it's not a bad idea to look at and possibly scheduling them in advance, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially in an area like, let's say, pelvic physical therapy is hard to come by, or they're booked out because they're really popular. It's not a bad idea to look at your due date and add 10 weeks on the other side of that, to start thinking about when you might want to go ahead and proactively book one of these appointments. Same thing around your, chiropractor or massage, right? Letting your chiropractor know. And a lot of them are so great in our area. They want to know when you're in labor. They want to be able to adjust you if possible. They will definitely work you in and try to. I've had chiropractors come to my house before for postpartum visits. So they are out there. Don't be afraid to kind of be particular about the needs that you have during this time. I also want to talk a little bit about our next pillar, which takes us over to good nutrition.
Yes.
And this is also something that we can prepare in advance for. But when we look at what good nutrition means, particularly around postpartum, now this is certainly not exhaustive, right? Because there's a lot that we could go into here. We could have an entire class, and there are classes around good nutrition in the postpartum season. However, for this pillar, there's a few key points that we want to look at. And one of them is warmth, right? And so what a great way to do that than warm, brothy soups. And the reason that we think about that, number one, it's warmth. Number two, easily digestible ingredients are really, really important. So, we want to ease back into, not into eating, but, our digestion takes a pause. It slows down during birth. That's normal. And then if we've had any type of medications, particularly opioids during our birthing process, that can sometimes exacerbate constipation or the slowing of the digestive processes, excuse me. So when we think about returning to a regular rhythm and, kind of restarting that system, if you will, ramping it back up, we want to go easy. So a couple of good ways to think about it would be, what's your favorite soups? What do you like? And what can you add in those soups to give you a little extra boost, right? If we know we need some protein and we want to try to eat the rainbow, which I think is a great way to think about it, once you kind of ease back into this, soups are a great way. They're like a catch-all. You can throw so many things into a beautiful soup. Bone broths are great. Amino acids, right? Collagen, we hear a lot about skin and firming. Not that that necessarily should be a priority, but I want to acknowledge that is for some folks. It's not good or bad, it just is. Not something that's going to happen right away, but these are the good building blocks around getting there. The other thing is like soup is fantastic at boosting our hydration, especially if you're not such a great water drinker. It'll be a lot easier for some of us to drink a warm broth than to just drink lukewarm water or, water in general even. I know I struggle with water, but if you give me broth, ooh, I'll drink it.
So, well, Barb, with the collagen you were saying for the skin and the tissues and everything, that may not be, we think about our outside skin, like our tummies and like all of that. Our tissue, our cervical tissue, our vaginal tissue, all of that has some major work to do. Your internal organs have some major work to do. And so that collagen and those amino acids can be really crucial in helping all of that tissue. So continue. Sorry, just had to pop in and say that.
I mean, all of these are on there for a reason because they are the building blocks. They do so much work from the inside out. Yeah. So many people are hearing now about collagen and how it helps our skin, but you are 1000% correct that it's not just our skin. It is the building blocks of all of our body. And so does protein, right? Protein is an essential macronutrient, both during pregnancy and postpartum. And it's, also helping with cell growth. So, think about all of the changes that we are making, the milk that we are making, the blood that there's just a lot that our body is doing. And protein can really help us to stay full, like have that feeling of fullness because our calorie needs change a little bit. And even if it doesn't drastically jump up postpartum, we're feeling different in this season, right? Our sleep's off a little bit. What we're doing with our body is off, and that can contribute to some up and down in our blood sugars. And yes, we're supposed to have some fluctuations and we're not supposed to stay elevated all of the time. But when we have those big crashes, that can really make us feel crummy. And when you add that on to feeling a little sleep deprived already or a lot, and we're a little sore and tired, we don't want to be nauseous. We don't want to feel, clammy or really extreme hunger. We don't, so protein can help with that. And great soups are a great way to do that. And then we also know really, really important data and solid data around the fact that our omega-3s are really important and protective of our mental health too. So we can start on that now, anytime. All of our bodies on this beautiful planet need this, but particularly when we are pregnant and in that postpartum season. When we get a little bit of extra EPA during our pregnancy, it may help us to reduce some symptoms associated with depression. And we do know that DHA supplementation can reduce the risk of postpartum depression. So, a good fatty oil, however you want to go about it,
Yeah.
2 to 500. There's a lot of different dosing. The recommendation, any varies anywhere in there. The important thing here is that you're talking to your provider so that you're getting the right information for you, right? We can speak here to a population all day, but your individual needs may be a little different. So please make sure that you're visiting with your provider about what your risk factors may be and what your dosages on things like this might look like for you. But the other thing I like to point out about when we're thinking about nutrition postpartum is that it has to be accessible, right? We have to be able to eat. So if we have all of these fantastic ideas and meal plans, but the execution of them leaves us hungry because we don't have time, or it's more labor intensive, or
Mhm.
it's just not working in the way it's not working for us. We have to acknowledge that too. So the most important thing is that we have to feed ourselves, right? And so for some of us that are neurodivergent, that's harder. That's harder than
Yeah.
for others, especially when we get all of the extra external stressors out there. So it is not a bad idea to start thinking now about what your postpartum nutrition plan can be. And that is going to be included in any good postpartum plan that we'll talk more about later. But that could look like, meal prep days where we just double batch a few of our favorite recipes and store them away. It could look like creating the bases of these soups. So all we have to do is thaw that and add in our yummies. It can be we're completely pre-cooking everything, and then all we have to do is warm. It may be that we aren't pre-cooking anything and we are completely leaning on convenience. That is
Mhm.
also okay, because convenience is better than us not eating or not eating the way that we should. And a lot
It's
of
kind
us,
of that good, better, best practice
yes,
situation.
I mean, like
Yeah.
best is nothing if it's not being like if it's not being put into practice, right? So
Exactly.
we have to meet ourselves where we are, and that can be difficult for some of us. So the keep it simple to the degree that feels good for you, and know that it's okay to eat. It's such an important thing, and it's also an act of self-love. It's a way
Mhm.
that we feed our soul, our spirits, our minds, our babies, right? We're feeding our babies from our bodies. A lot of us are. And even if we aren't, we're still feeding ourselves, which lets us be a better version for our partner, for our children. It lets us show up in the best way for us. Um,
Absolutely.
you want to add anything here, Amanda?
So only my anecdotal story of how there was one day, but I mean, you know, lots of things. Um, but I definitely during my postpartum season, without shame or, whatever, I ate an entire pan of brownies one day. Like basically that was an entire like meal. I just ate a pan of brownies. Which I don't know that I necessarily recommend, but you know what? We're all here. My child's healthy.
That's it.
I, you know,
I survived on trail mix, like just
yes.
bags of trail mix. I don't know. It was the thing that was handed to me post birth in a cup so I could have my baby, right? And I was like, oh, it's so good. And it was
That
so,
became your safe food.
it became my safe food. And I probably ate
Yes.
at least my baby's body weight in it.
Well, I definitely know the brownies probably weighed the same amount of my baby. So
That's okay. But one of the things we also did, we did some meal prepping and some batch cooking. And I say it was actually my husband. And I got to say, I think I probably fell in love with him a little bit more that day to see him
no.
up all of that. But one of my favorite things that happened to me in my postpartum with my daughter was we did get some support from our neighborhood. We had a little bit more of a village. We had just moved into the neighborhood that we were in and the city that we were in with my first. And so with my second, I had a lot more connections and I had clients and just folks that were able to stop by and show me a little bit of love. And we got a lot of that, but it ended up looking a lot like church lady casseroles, which not knocking, they're fantastic. And they were warm in my belly and or pizza. And while I absolutely felt the love in that, it was a client that I had recently supported that dropped by her Costco haul of whole grains and fresh fruits and
Oh.
things that was nourishing and thoughtful.
Mm.
It was something I could eat with one hand. It was conveniently prepared. Like it was a big old batch of fruit tray, veggie tray, chicken salad, whole grain chips and breads and yummy, produce. I mean, it was a gift of love. And
What a gift.
I felt loved eating it. And you know what she did? She didn't stay for longer than about 5 minutes. She came
That's
in,
amazing.
she dropped it off. She said, I love you. I can't wait to talk to you. I know what this season is like. So bye-bye, and it
Man.
was just,
Yeah.
I loved her for that. So there's a
Well,
lot of
gosh,
ways
yeah.
we can set ourselves up in this season. What have you got?
Well, man, that's such an incredible segue into our next slide, into our next pillar of community.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So when we think about, our community, that's a great way to really start thinking about that our community and our family may or may not overlap. And there may be places where they overlap more than others, right? So when we think about our community, there's going to be different roles for different people, right? And the good news is that to a degree, you very much get to decide what this looks like. So starting a little bit now with some reflection and some maybe even some honest conversations around who can you lean into, right? Who is there? Who's available? Now, of the people that are there and available, how do they make you feel after you spend time with them,
Mm.
right? Because there are people out there, and I speak in terms of energies a lot, that take that energy from you. They leave you kind of, your batteries are low, you're
They're an
down.
energy vampire.
Yes, I didn't want to say it, but yes, that's exactly what it is. And I don't know why I didn't want to say it,
Straight
because
up.
it's on them. But right, I'm not the energy. I mean, I might be to some people, but the whole point here is that who fills your cup, and who leaves you feeling like you need a refill. And so
100%.
yes, so I encourage you to think about that. And it's okay to be selective. You do not owe anybody the gift of this season. You don't owe them anything during this time. Your first priority is you and your recovery and, getting to know your baby and getting all of this off to a good start. So that being said, when we do think about people that are around us, it is okay to be selective in terms of giving people jobs, right? At the end of this, at the very, very base of all of this, it comes from a desire for people to help. Typically, people insert themselves into or offer to help because they love you and they want to help. But their idea of help may not be what you actually need, or may not be your idea of helpful. So it is okay to say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad. Yes, I would love for you to be involved in this time. I'd love for you to come see the baby, but I do need some help with X, Y, and Z.
Mm.
Right. And then it's okay to stick to that. Personal example here, my mom, right? Like, great person, great lady. She doesn't leave me feeling filled. But my kiddos, she was the best person to take my oldest child and have his cup fill while
Mm.
doing postpartum with our baby, because that was her grandkid, her first grandkid. And so I knew in my brain that I could give kind of that over to my mom for the first week or so, to honestly, it was like the first month, if we're being very honest, about outings and lunches and park play dates and just getting that toddler energy that we need to kind of burn. I could trust her with that. But she wasn't going to be the person to come sit with me and have a cup of tea, right? That's not who she was. She wasn't going to be able to talk to me in a way to give me counsel or lift my spirits. Those were my clients, or some of them. Those were my good friends. That was my husband. That was my sister, right? And each of them did it in a different way. There's people that I love that would come by and could clean my house, and that was their jam. And then they left, right? Or like my client that dropped off the food and left. So right, really, there's going to be different roles for different people, and you may surprise yourself and who steps up and does what really well. Um, this is also a really good job, um, can be really fitting for folks who've had kiddos before, who've had children before. And I'm not saying that we can't benefit from help that for those that haven't, but it sometimes seems like they've done it before, right? So they kind of have an insight into what it really can be like. So all of this to say, friends, you get to choose who is in your community. You get to choose your family. I call them family. Who's your family? What do you do? How can I help you? And stop and think. If your friend said, "Oh my gosh, Amanda, I'm like underwater. I just need someone to like come and just be with me today," you would be there in a minute, and you would bring
Absolutely.
scones and tea, and like you would love on them, like, and you would
Yeah.
feel good to be asked that. And I think sometimes we forget that as people who need to ask for help, is that this is a way for that. I mean, you're lifting that person up too. Not that that should be the reason, but I just want you to remember that there's a reciprocity there, right? It feels good to help, and it feels good to get the help. And this is how we build that. So think about this now. And when we talk about thinking about roles and what that can look like, that's actually a really good segue into our next slide. on postpartum planning, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's so important that we think about setting ourselves up for success. We can talk about all the shoulds all day, but like how do we get there? And that's what we're going to do here.
Man, that's my favorite therapist joke is when you're shoulding yourself.
Yeah,
I know. I know.
that one hits a little close to
And I
home.
should be doing that. And I should be, so we need to stop shoulding ourselves and figure out what actually works for us. And I think that's the beauty of a postpartum plan. We spend so much time focusing on our birth plan and our birth preferences and this and that and all. And then postpartum is just winging it, which I don't recommend. And that can look like, I keep going back to it, that can look like big conversations with your partner or the people that are going to be directly around you, because if they already have a clear idea, you've already set up the expectations. And if things need to shift and ebb and flow, that's okay. But that groundwork has already been laid. But you can't do that unless you actually have a vision for it. So what is a postpartum plan? It's just like a birth plan. A postpartum plan helps you to anticipate and plan for the obstacles. If you already know that you are at risk for PMAD, if you already know even before pregnancy, okay, I have a history of depression, I have a history of bipolar, whatever that looks like, then you probably know already that you're going to be at higher risk for that in postpartum, right? So what can we do to support that? Are we going to do some placenta encapsulation? Are we going to set up a time with our therapist? These are things that already have on our birth plan or on our postpartum plan. Do you know that you love this one specific soup that no one else knows how to make except for you, and you put the magic sprinkle dust in there? Then maybe that would be something good to pre-plan and pre-batch to have in your freezer, so that when you're absolutely craving it, all somebody has to do is go in there and defrost it for you. And so why do we need this? So we're centralizing the resources with a fresh brain, because you don't want to do this when you only have an hour of sleep in your body. You're able to have considerations on there for sleep, mental health, your dietary needs, and so much more. And this should include this should include our partner, our direct community, those that are going to be in direct caretaking of you. We have a great free downloadable option with Birth Fort Worth. I also, and it's one of the resources that I have really come to treasure for looking at postpartum season. You can see all of my earmarks, and this book has become so highlighted and notes and all. This is the 4th trimester. It is a postpartum guide. It does have some information there as far as preparing for labor, which is really great and valuable, but the main meat of this is all based into 4th trimester. And it's by Kimberly N. Johnson. And she also has another postpartum plan in here, but I'm just going to use as a reference. I know the grand majority of this is in our downloadable from Birth Fort Worth, but this is what's right in front of me, so I'm going to take a look through this. So, even through here, it's visitors. What do I want visitors to look like? Rest. What does rest look like for you? Like I said earlier, that doesn't always look like sleep. Obviously, sleep when you can get it, but it's not always going to look like sleep. Guided meditation, breath work, shutting go rest in the shower, take a bath, whatever that looks like. Food. What are the things that you really want to nourish your body with? Companionship. So who is your tribe in this moment? What is the village that you're building out? And that can look like even having a couple lines and notes in there of, I am hitting rock bottom, who can my partner or immediate community call in order to help fill my cup? Does that look like a therapist? Does that look like my best friend from childhood? Does that look like Great Aunt Sally? Who fills that need, right? It's a larger thing. What brings you joy? That's a huge part of that. If that's spending some time outside, if that's sitting in a window, just sipping a cup of tea, and just having a few minutes to your brain to kind of it come back into your body, that's huge. Some other things to consider, dividing of household chores. What's your relationship plan? Which I think can have a lot of pressure on it. I think that's definitely one that can ebb and flow. But, going into it with those conversations of your partner, that can be a very hard time. Pregnancy is kind of an interesting intimacy time for many folks. And then that doesn't change going into postpartum. Now maybe a person that you've really poured a lot into, even if you have, a very egalitarian relationship, the roles have shifted. That person is now very solely taking care of you and a newborn, possibly a toddler. And so that can be a very uncomfortable role for some people to either give up or to step into. And so having those conversations and having a plan that you have really put together along with each other can be very crucial. A letter for meal train participants. If you have somebody who's putting together a meal train, if you're putting together your own meal train, which no shame on that. There is no etiquette in my book that says that you cannot put together your own meal train. Etiquette, BDM. And then maybe even a sign for your front door, like, please leave the food here in the cooler. Don't ring the doorbell because it's going to annoy the dogs, and then all of a sudden they're barking and waking our baby up. Whatever that personalized sign looks like for you. That can be a Post-it note. That can be you get real creative with your Cricut and go to town. I mean, that can look like so many things. So that's kind of just a snapshot of what that looks like. So that even goes into this really wonderful grid that we have. Our communication with our partner. Keep those communication lines open, right? The moment that we shut down and we start kind of filing that away, those things get bigger and bigger and bigger. Those creating molehills and making them into mountains, right? It tends to build up and explode because we're just burying that down deep. And also with that, you don't know if they potentially experience some secondhand trauma from birth as well, depending on what that looks like. So having that a two-way street and being able to get raw with each other is really important. Setting up your support people. We've already talked a little bit on that. Leaning on your community or creating it yourself. For some people, they have built-in community. They have built-in family that's just going to automatically come in and take care of them. But not everyone has that. Maybe they're transplants to the area. Maybe, they've lost most of their family and they don't have a big community. That can look like bringing in a postpartum doula. That can look like a night nanny, to help you get rest. That can look like a lot of different things. Meal planning, batch cooking, freezer meals, meal trains. One of the other things that I was going to say with support people, but it goes with meal planning. You can even create a little thing to go on your fridge that's basically, here's the needs that I have in my household. Pick one. So when people come over to your house, or you have somebody that calls and says, hey, do you need anything? You're like, well, actually, there's something on the fridge. If you could tackle a couple of those items, that's huge. They could do the dishes for you, or walk the dogs, or vacuum, or, whatever you need in that moment. And so many people want to help. Like you were saying, Barb, like we want to be needed. It goes way back into our village mentality of we want to surround people. We want to get messy with people, but we don't always know how. And so we try to stay really respectful of people's space and then you're so tired that you may not know what you need in that moment. And so then nobody's needs are getting met. And so if you have some of that pre-planning of like, what, go check out that list, see what needs to be done. And they're just in there folding laundry or, whatever, man, what a huge weight lifted. So where again, you get some more rest. Scheduling your body work and your therapies ahead of time. If you're wanting to even, there are some things that require having a pre-meeting, some pelvic floor therapists, chiropractors, they want to have that initial meeting. So doing that in your pregnancy stage before you even touch your postpartum can be really important, to where you're not having to do those initial meetings and initial consults during your postpartum season. You're able to say, hey, I need this. Can I come in? Let's schedule something, right? So that would be a good thing to look into as well. Gifting time. Oh,
sorry,
yes.
I just wanted to point out, you can do the same thing with your mental health support, right? If we anticipate needing some therapy or connecting with a therapist, do it now, because it's infinitely easier to pick up the phone and call somebody that you've already spoken to and you know who you're going to call, right? And again, this goes for mental health too. Yes, all of these types of support that we need, especially that mental health therapy support, that's a big one too.
100%. Well, and I mean, you might even have a therapist that you've been working with for years, but maybe in the last year you didn't need anything. You didn't need a visit. And so even like you said, pick up that, hey, it's so good to hear your voice. I know it's been a while. You know what? Right now I'm pregnant and I'm about to have this baby, and I would love to set up a few sessions on the other side, but I just wanted to get that on your radar so that you know it's coming. So simple. So that way, whenever you're through the weeds and you're ready for that, all you have to do is pick up the phone, and they already know you're coming. And they're excited. They're like, look at you did it. Here you are. So, I mean, gifting yourself time to rest and time to heal. And I know that's a very privileged scenario. I know not everyone has that ability and that time to really do that. And they have to jump back out into the workplace or whatever that looks like, jumping back into parenthood, if you have littles. And so, figuring out creative ways that you can set yourself up for success on that. And then support, joining a local or a virtual support group for new parents, people that are in the same place as you, people that really understand, I didn't sleep a single minute last night. And they're like, oh my gosh, me too. Community goes such a very long way. And having somebody that really understands where you're at is just huge. And so, whether that be in person, if you have that ability, whether that be virtually, there's La Leche League, there's such a vast amount of resources out there if we go looking for them. So yeah. Anything to add to those, Barb?
Yeah, we have a Tuesday support group that's virtual.
Yes, we do.
Yep. So if virtual is your jam and you need that, we do that. If you want something in person, they exist out there too. And when we speak about support, I offer parent education as well. So even if we're not able to get out and about, or that isn't your thing, maybe you're a little bit more of an introvert, maybe we're going to do these virtual type supports, or maybe you want to work a little bit more with someone who can kind of educate and guide you through this, right? So that's something that I do as a parent educator. You can get one-on-one support from me on things like milestones, growth spurts. We can talk about sleep, mental health, lots more. And I offer that support all the way from, trying to get pregnant all the way through, age 5 for your child. I get a lot of inquiries and a lot of families that I'm supporting in that first year, because that is built in with one of our packages here at Birth Fort Worth for doula support. If you work with the team, then you are able to get support all the way through baby's first year, right? So that is something that it would look like one-to-one calls with me, or videos just like this, where we get on and talk about, okay, what's going on, popular calls. Some of my most popular ones are planning for postpartum, which I am totally here for. Then we talk a lot about returning to work, and preparing for that. We talk about getting serious for sleep, especially around that 4 or 5 month mark. Now we also work with a virtual sleep specialist to kind of help you even hone in more into your child's needs and help you form like a customized plan through some of these, sleep disturbances. But we also talk about solids and baby-led weaning. Potty training is something, managing big emotions and tantrums. But I've also talked to folks about their relationship as well. I was just talking to a partner, just kind of talking about the changes in their relationship as this first year kind of has evolved for them. And he said one of the most profound things, and I thought that it was a perfect thing to include here, which was this this entire first year is the season of small gestures, right? It's
Hmm.
different. And I thought that that was so powerful and so insightful from him. But you know, he was doing a great job. They were working together, doing their best. But yes, you can get more support from something like, you know, myself, where we can do parent education, but also Amanda offers, you know, support in our postpartum season. So let's look a little bit at what she does.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I not only am I birth and a postpartum doula, I specialize in healing rituals for your birth or for your postpartum season. So I do Reiki sessions that are, you know, energy work, placenta encapsulations. That can be a really, for I think some folks, that's a really powerful way. I mean, you grew your baby, you grew your placenta, and now your placenta can come back and nourish you. That's just amazing. Our bodies are so amazing. I am in constant awe um, of all of that. I feel like every placenta that I work with, I'm just like, you supported a whole human, and now you're going to support another whole human. I get a little nerdy about it. I'm very excited. One of the things that I have very much fallen in love with are yoni steaming. Steams are something that have been used all around the world throughout history. There are some cultures that are very strongly still using it today. But essentially, we are sitting over a pot of steaming herbs. I like to joke that it's like drinking a cup of tea in a different way. Um, and so that it's very soothing. It's very a very gentle way of, you know, introducing some stimuli back into that very tender area, you know, helping with your stitches and, you know, potential tears, things like that. But also helping all of those tissues as they heal with the postpartum bleeding, things like that. There are folks that use it for fertility purposes or general women's health, but we've really found that during your postpartum season, it can be really healing.
When do you,
Actually,
oh,
what is
sorry,
it?
do you recommend that folks begin steaming postpartum if that's something that they're interested in?
Sure. So it's really kind of up to them. You know, there are folks that will steam right away. You know, they just had their baby. Let's do a steam. But then there's others, you know, a really good time I found is, you know, around day 3 to 5. You know, your body's had a little bit of time to settle. And then we start introducing steams and that kind of thing. You know, in Korea, I believe it's either Korea or Thailand. Forgive me for not having that nailed down. But they do 40 days of steaming. So every single day they're doing a short steam. There's a lot of talk in the fourth trimester book, you know, regarding adding steams into your postpartum season. And so it's really, really a lovely ritual. Along with that, I also do bingkong binding, which is a traditional Malaysian practice of binding the stomach. And so with that, I do a whole what I like to call a post party. You know, we start with a yoni steam, and then we do a full circulation rub for the body, bringing warmth and energy to the body with warming oil, and then teaching you how to bind your stomach. That can bring such good support, you know, like we talked about, you know, with the body and the relaxant, everything still feels loose and empty and heavy. And so that can bring such good support to where I hear people all the time, they're like, I feel like I can breathe again. I feel like I can walk across the room again. Because now they're feeling that support. So we really want to bring that warmth and that support to the body. And then I also have some postpartum herbal baths and different herbal things, you know, tea blends, things like that. So yeah, I would love to give more information and help people on that journey if they're interested.
That's awesome. I love it. And I dropped the link to learning more about the post party and things like that on Birth Fort Worth's
Oh,
page,
beautiful.
birthfortworth.com. And then you can go to postpartum tab, click down, and you'll see the steams, the post party
Mhm.
add-ons, postpartum doula support. And, you know, Amanda is one of our amazing postpartum doulas. We do have some other ones that specialize in other things or that bring different skill sets to the table, but they are all fantastic at helping you, you know, actualize your postpartum recovery. So we
And
do have,
people ask me, oh, sorry. people ask me a lot, what is a postpartum doula? And it can be a lot of things. A lot of times it can be bringing somebody in to help you get a little extra sleep, so baby care during that. It can be helping with some batch cooking. It can be one of my favorite times that I've done some postpartum work. This family had their baby very early, and we're not expecting to have a baby anytime soon. They did not have a lot of family locally. They didn't have a large community. They're a little bit more introverted. And so they hired me for this, honestly, mostly companionship, to have somebody in home, for those first few weeks, to be like, yeah, you're doing great. Oh, okay, let's try this. And I definitely did some like housework things for them. But honestly, it was really companionship. I helped, her with her hair one day, as they prepared for their newborn session to take photos at home. And so, she has very curly hair. And so helping her do that, that would have been a lot of time of standing up, and, it's a lot of energy. And so that was just such a sweet time of loving on that family, that looked a little bit, less transactional. It sometimes, like I said, is getting sleep, is doing some light housework, things like that. But it can look very different for each individual family.
I love that. It's ultimately a postpartum doula meets you where you are. If you need help during the day, during the day. If you need some help through the night, we're going to be there. And those shifts can look, that's an 8-hour shift through the night. We come at 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to help you get comfy in bed. We're going to, help you feed your baby in whatever way that works for you. That may mean that we bring baby to you, or it may mean that we feed them a bottle of formula or expressed milk or whatever it looks like. But it is just filling the gaps. We talk about what a doula does. And I think that this particular saying works for birth or postpartum. We're just like the grout. We're the mortar that comes in and just fills in where we need to. We help the foundation be nice and strong. And then then we're unrecognizable. We're out of there, right? I mean, we're there, but that's not the focus anymore. And so I think that that's a really beautiful way to kind of think about a postpartum doula. So as we wrap up today, we're going to talk, we have some resources here, and Amanda, I think I'm talking over you here, forgive me. But we're going to roll with it. So the resources here, just the things that we've mentioned today: the 4th trimester book that Amanda mentioned, excellent read. The Sitting Moon, A Guide to Rejuvenation After Pregnancy. That's also
such a good book.
Such a good book. We have, if you're a birth client with us, we have our free postpartum planning worksheets. If you've attended today and you'd like more information on those, reach out to us. And I've also dropped the Google Drive folder into the chat a few slides back. If you want to explore those postpartum plans, they're in there for you. Now, there's also some data here, an upload where you can read a little bit more around some of the data that we pulled from, and more information around the impact of support and rituals during the postpartum season. Huge there. And then also I'd like to talk about Life with Baby. This is that book that we had a few slides back. You can see that mine is well loved. It's tabbed. But this, I love this plan, because again, it's written by a postpartum doula, licensed clinical social worker, both with extensive training and a focus in those perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And this is written for the partner too. There's an entire section in there on their postpartum plan.
Nice.
Yes. That's because we're talking about community, and if we're wanting to build it and help get a look at what our resources are, I love this one too. And it's very, very inexpensive. I think it's $25 at lifewithbabyworkbook.com. So you have some resources here, and ultimately you can always reach out to us here at Birth Fort Worth to learn more about what that support could look like, or to just even help you realize what your resources are in your community. We can have a postpartum planning call and go over exactly, like what we've done today, but just on a scale just for you. So as we wrap up today, Amanda, anything that you'd like to add before we sign off?
Man, I think that really covers so much of it. In reality, and I think I touched on it a little bit, the biggest part of it is, you may not have the capacity or the ability to really make every single one of those pillars flawless and super strong. And, but if you can even, cover a couple of those, 2 or 3 of those, and make them really rock solid, and then maybe just put a couple of things in place for those others too, they will support each other when one of them has a deficit. Because in reality, there will be a deficit. We're going to be exhausted. We're going to, all these things. But when we can really build up these key places in our lives, and that might be for your fourth trimester, that might be for a financial crisis, that might be, we got a disaster planning kit from my mom the other day, and looking through it, I'm like, all of this covers that. The more that we can be prepared for something, the better off we are. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be a flawless season. It doesn't mean that it's not going to come with its struggles and its hardships. But man, sitting down to a warm dinner that's going to nourish you, taking a hot shower, these things go such an incredible way for us to be able to support our bodies, to then be able to help our tiny humans thrive and grow. And what a gift of showing them what that looks like too, because that continues on into the rest of your life. This is the season where we're able to really create new patterns and new pathways to set our family up for the future. And so I don't know, I get really excited, and I'm really excited for all of you as you're on this journey and headed into this journey, because it can be an exhausting season, but it can be such an incredible healing time as well. So yeah,
So many opportunities in this season, right?
so many.
It's a new beginning.
I mean,
so many iterations of that concept of being a fresh new beginning, and you have power here.
You do. I mean, I've even, anecdotally, I've even heard, stories of folks who maybe had an autoimmune disease for all their life, or something, chronic pain, and their bodies are in such a time of healing, and maybe they've never taken this really dedicated time to healing before in their lives, and they come out of their postpartum season, and now their bodies have healed from some of these other things. And I know that's, it's not the expectation. And I know that that's not every story, but it is incredible to me when we actually give the body the space and time to do what it needs to do. It takes care of you.
It's beautiful. I mean, yeah, it's amazing what we can accomplish with ourselves when we have some intentionality and time and some space to just be who we need to be in that moment. And that's not something that we get to do very often. So we just want to thank you all for taking the time with us today. I hope that this was helpful. Again, if you'd like to learn more, birthfortworth.com, or you can message us, find us on Insta, social media, all that good stuff. But Amanda and I are here. We would love to chat more with you about any questions that you have. I hope you found this helpful. We're going to go ahead and end it here today, but please reach out if there's anything that we can do to support you through your best postpartum.
Absolutely.
Take care, y'all.
Thank you.